The state ramps up efforts to investigate election fraud and clean up registration rolls. That's raising concern about a chilling effect on voters.
What we want is our voters to say, these are fair, these are transparent, my vote counts.
We look closer at how the moves could affect voters and what you need to do now to make sure your vote counts in November. A new study looks at why it's getting harder to afford a home in Texas. We talked to the man behind the study and how it could lead to change from lawmakers. Texas musicians raise concerns about artificial intelligence stealing their sounds and styles.
And it's a fundamental violation that strikes at the heart of who we are and what we do as creators.
The call for action at the Capitol to regulate AI voices and videos.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. We're just over 2 months away from Election Day, and the state is ramping up efforts to clean up the voter rolls and investigate allegations of voter fraud. Those efforts are raising concern and accusations of voter intimidation. As Ryan Chandler reports, this all comes as state leaders work to reassure Texas voters that this year's election will be fair and secure.
This is point blank voter intimidation.
In San Antonio Monday,
it is only voter suppression.
Hispanic civil rights group LULAC called for the DOJ to intervene in Texas's vote harvesting investigation after the Attorney General's office executed armed early morning raids into the homes of Latino election volunteers. Paxton says the search warrants are tied to allegations a Frio County official illegally harvested votes for local races. The accused deny that and worry the investigation could stifle legal efforts to help elderly voters get registered.
I'm not doing anything illegal. All I do is help the seniors.
The controversy comes as officials from both parties work to keep Texas elections secure and accessible.
What we want is our voters to say, these are fair, these are transparent, my vote counts. As a state, we need to be the gold standard for the country.
Governor Abbott touting a voter roll cleanup that canceled the registration of more than 1 million people, including 6,500 potential non-citizens and almost 500,000 dead people. The governor didn't specify if any of those had actually voted.
This false narrative that there's all these undocumented folks that are registering to vote, that our election system somehow is rigged, which is not.
Morales calls claims of election fraud scare tactics. Both parties encouraging people to vote with faith the system is fair.
I want our voters to know that their vote matters, their vote's going to be counted, and there's going to be transparency in the process.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
You heard Ryan mention how the governor is touting work to clean up the state's voter rolls. That effort canceled the registration of more than 1 million people. Most of those fell into one of two categories. First, people who died, but the largest number of canceled registrations came from people on the voter suspense list. That's when a county can't confirm the address of a registered voter. And a lot of Texas voters are currently on that list, more than 2.2 million, according to the Secretary of State's office. Being on the suspense list does not mean your registration will get canceled right away, but Will Dupree found out that it could cause headaches when you go to cast your ballot and what you can do to fix it.
Good evening.
When the Democratic National Convention kicked off last week, Nico Ramsey wanted to show how his friends could look up their voting information.
I was very excited and actually was just using it as a way to encourage my network to get out the vote, assuming it was going to be active.
What he ended up finding was this: his own registration status listed as suspense, which confused him.
It's not that descriptive on what that means. And it's kind of intimidating in a way to see will I still be able to vote? Did I miss out on something?
Texas reports of its nearly 18.3 million registered voters, about 12% are on this suspense list, meaning their counties are unsure if they moved.
I think suspense can sound like a scary word, and it's not. Actually, the suspense list is a way to protect voters.
Alicia Pierce with the Secretary of State's office says this helps remind people to correct their information. They can still vote while on this list, but when they go to the polls, it does mean either having to sign a statement of residence to share their latest address or casting a provisional ballot. Do you think there should be more done to notify people about that?
I think that this is a great service that you're doing here, helping to get the word out. Remember that the suspense list is actually a measure that protects voters.
Voters have until October 7th to update their voter registration info. And Nico Ramsey already submitted a new change of address form so that he can get off the suspense list.
Don't assume that your status might always be active. Double check and check often.
An important step to make sure your vote counts. Will Dupree, State of Texas.
State law requires counties to remove the names of those either not voting or those who fail to contact them after 4 years in that suspense status. We want to dig a little deeper. Joining us now for Insight is Joyce LeBombard, the president of the League of Women Voters of Texas. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So Joyce, the Secretary of State tells us more than 2 million Texans are on the suspense list. How do you know if you're on the list, and what do you do to make sure that you don't run into trouble when you go to vote?
So there's a couple of ways that you can check to see if your voter registration is in suspense. One is on votetexas.gov, and there's a button there called Am I Registered? You can also go to our interactive website, vote411.org, and there's a button there that says check your voter registration. They actually both bring you to the same app. And there you can see if your voter registration status is active. If you're on the suspense list, it will say suspense, and then that's when you know you need to do the next step.
You know, Governor Abbott has been touting efforts that removed more than 1 million people from the Texas voter rolls. That's raised some questions, but is there anything unusual or cause for concerns from that process that you're seeing?
I don't know if we're concerned quite yet. You know, it's over a 3-year period. And so while some of the numbers appear to be high, when you take into consideration it's over a 3-year period, the numbers are very small. On the other hand, the non-citizenship number compared to other states is kind of high. And so, you know, we'd like to see some more transparency around those numbers, find out what the data sources were used for those non-citizenships, to make sure that naturalized citizens were not swept into that category when they are actually eligible to vote, like similar to what happened in 2019.
Yeah, and related to all that, the Attorney General has put an emphasis on fighting voter fraud and penalties for voting illegally. That's rare in Texas, we know, but it does have some people concerned. What do voters need to know or do to make sure their vote counts?
It is concerning, and it's concerning because we don't want to scare people who are eligible to not go to the polls. And so I think everyone should rest assured that, you know, if their voter registration is intact, or even if it has some other status, they should go talk to their voter registrar, get that straightened out before the election, if possible, on October 7th. But if you are on suspense, you can still vote. They will just have you fill out a form confirming what your address is, and then you can still go vote. But we are concerned that it might cause some people to not go vote, just based on some of the ways things are being phrased by the governor and the attorney general.
All right, good insight, good tips. Thank you very much. Joyce LeBombard, from the president of the League of Women Voters of Texas. I appreciate you being with us. A lawmaker in the Texas House is switching parties months after losing her primary. Houston Representative Sean Thiry announced she's joining the Republican Party. Last session, Thiry was one of only 4 Democrats who supported Senate Bill 14, which limits health care options for transgender minors. That vote became an issue for Democrats, who worked to push her out of office. In a statement, Thiry wrote, "The Democratic Party has veered so far left, so deep into the progressive abyss, that it now champions policies that I cannot, in good conscience, support." Since Thiry lost her primary, she will not be in the Texas legislature next session. The reaction from state Democrats basically said, good riddance. Trey Martinez Fisher, who chairs the Texas House Democratic Caucus, wrote, "Sean Thiry was fired by the voters of House District 146 because she didn't respect their will and what they wanted for their community." Union organizer Lauren Ashley Simmons defeated Thiry in the Democratic primary runoff. She faces Republican Lance York in the November election. The district lines heavily favor Democrats. Simmons' campaign sent us a statement about Theory switching parties, saying, "I'm glad she can finally live openly as her authentic self." It's getting harder to afford a home in Texas, but what can the state do about it? We talked to the man behind a new study that looks deeper at the problem and potential solutions.
Our goal is to increase our presence on the border, increase our tools, increase the barriers on the border.
Migrant crossings drop at the border, but hear why the governor still plans to ramp up building barriers.